Obviously, it's bantering, right?
Yeah,
We're just
It's
talking.
shutter nonsense.
It's shutter nonsense. We did. It's shutter nonsense, exactly.
Right.
And it was like, you had to just loosen the whole thing and
Right.
just, wow, great.
Yeah.
Now we're back to getting all three axes figured out.
Her frustration was that thing's not cheap either. She
Right.
spent all
No,
this
no.
money, and she's frustrated with it.
At the beginning of the workshop, it was like, let's check
Right.
different weather apps and figure out
Go
where
to
we're
specific
going.
locations. The
did work
forecast
out.
never really aligned with what we thought
did
it was going
not.
to be.
So by the
that was
end, we were just
interesting.
sort of going more towards, we are going to this location no matter what.
This is pretty off the cuff. and
Yes,
lighthearted.
100%. No script. I almost
Right.
never do anything unscripted. We
the
just
old-
literally sat down and started recording.
It's the old Bill O'Reilly meme. F it, we'll do it live. All
what
right.
happens? You get a bunch of YouTubers trying to do a podcast.
Right. Oh, I already screwed it up.
Not going to let us in menu I record.
Maybe not. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that too, didn't I? Let's just stop this. This is a great start. Oh, by the way, I'm recording.
What?
All right, well, after that wonderful banter, I guess let's just kick into this. So,
Sounds good.
welcome to Shutter Nonsense, a brand new, ridiculous photography podcast. For those of you that don't know, my name is Michael Rung. I'm a nature photographer based out of North Texas, Fort Worth, Texas specifically, aka the dead zone of nature photography for the most part. And this is my cohort, Jeffrey Tadlock. Introduce yourself, Jeffrey.
I'm Jeffrey Tadlock. I am a landscape photographer based out of Central Ohio.
Why are you saying landscape like it's bigger
nature
or more,
versus
more
landscape.
pompous
we
compared
had
to
this
nature
debate
photography?
earlier this week, or somewhere we had this debate recently on nature versus landscape photographer, and nature probably sums it up best.
I agree. That's why I call myself a nature photographer.
Old habits die hard.
Yeah, so do old men. Actually, no, old men die young.
Old man jokes already.
Old men die easy. So as you can probably tell, not just from the podcast name of Shutter Nonsense, but also by our ridiculous banter here, it's intended to be a pretty casual, easygoing, kind of go with the flow kind of thing here. So we'll see. Kind of my intent with this was, and I've been thinking about doing a podcast for a little while, but I've really enjoyed the podcasts like Creative Banter with Cody Schultz and Ben Horn, especially with their announcement of an indefinite hiatus on that podcast, possibly permanent hiatus. Thought this would be a good opportunity to jump into it ourselves. Why not, right? I also like, I admit I don't watch too many of them, but Brews and Views on YouTube.
For sure.
I struggle to find the hours of time to sit down and watch them, but again, just very casual banter. There's Pubcast with a bunch of UK photographers that kind of take a similar approach. So here we are taking a swing at it, whether we should be or not. Did your mic fall off? Or are you just slouching? See what I'm dealing with already? I asked the wrong
Tilted.
guy.
You'd think I don't even know how to make a YouTube video
Right?
or something like
Yeah.
that.
So there's a segue. Hey, look at that. We both have YouTube channels. In addition to this Shutter Nonsense channel, you can find me at Michael Rung Photography.
And I'm over at Jeffrey Tadlock Photography.
Look at that. So what do you do on your YouTube channel?
Mine's predominantly education-based topics, and I do what I call mini gear reviews. They're not super in-depth technical specs. It's more like how does the gear I use perform out in the field. So I'll play with different things, and I try to do it after I've used it for a little bit in the field, and less spec related, but just more how does it work for an actual photographer in the field.
Cool. I'd say mine's pretty similar in terms of the gear. I've only done 2 gear reviews, so what am I to say?
I have many more gear reviews.
Yeah, that I'm some pro on gear reviews. I've got a tripod review and a geared head review. Otherwise, most of my videos are around Lightroom tutorials and education. I am starting to branch out a little bit into in-field vlogging as well. And we can talk about that. That's been kind of my response to a quote-unquote threat of AI and how do you know something's authentic or legit. And figure if I can show myself making my photos, then maybe people will actually trust that my stuff is actually rooted in reality.
Yep.
But I think the main thing we wanted to talk about is we're sitting here in beautiful Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. We just wrapped up, a 4-day
Yeah,
workshop?
essentially a 4-day workshop.
So we had 6 attendees on a 4-day workshop. This is my first group workshop that I've co-led.
Yep.
So Jeffrey's done several of them at this point in his hometown of, home turf, I guess
So
I should
home
say.
turf would
Yeah,
be good. My
home
hometown
turf.
would be pretty boring
Home
for a
region.
workshop. But home turf, home region, I've done lots of 1-day workshops in a particular popular area, and then multi-day workshops out in West Virginia. And then this is the year of branching into national parks, and Michael was a great person to collaborate with us with this workshop on. He brings a lot of skills to the table that are not my strongest skills, and I think between the two of us, we actually worked really well. We have a lot of the similar approach, I think, though we've got different strengths. Our core approach, I think, to things is fairly similar, so I think it worked.
Yeah, I think it went
well.
really, really well, and not surprisingly, I was had a little bit of nerves going into it for the first time, but once I got in the rhythm on the first outing, it went fantastic. We had a great group, and
Did have a good
out
group.
of the 6 people, 5 people had actually already done workshops with Jeffrey, so that made it very easy as well.
Yep.
So kudos to Jeffrey for having your little list of people you can reach out
Yeah.
to. So, overall, I think it went really well. What would you say some of the takeaways from this first national park workshop were?
Some of the first takeaways is probably, we had to contend with weather. I think that was probably one of the biggest things. A lot of my other workshops, I've gotten lucky and had good weather. This particular workshop, we had to balance a lot of weather patterns through here, judging whether it's going to be overcast, whether we're going to get downpoured on, things like that. And then trying to make intelligent choices around that while trying to get people to interesting photographs for the weather you are supposed to get.
Yeah, making intelligent choices, but also realizing by the end of the workshop that forget about the forecast because it was never right.
Which is essentially how we got by the end of the beginning of the workshop. It was like, let's check different weather apps and figure out
go
where
to
we're
specific
going.
locations, and it worked out.
It
but
did.
The
It did work
forecast
out.
never really aligned with what we thought
did
it was
not.
going to be. So
by the
that was
end, we were just
interesting.
sort of going more towards, we are going to this location no matter what. And that worked out for the most part as well.
Yeah,
too.
we only had one bust. That was the overlook last night.
Yeah,
and even that, there were some detail shots with some of the low clouds coming over the ridge line. But it didn't go too real great in terms of
I had my fingers
color or
crossed. I was
anything.
highly optimistic going into it. There was one windy forecast model that showed it was going to be good. The other one showed it was going to be bad. But I think the lesson learned from there, even though shot-wise there was only some brief environmental stuff, was it's still fun to be out, right? Like we were sitting up there in the overlook. I think everyone still had a good time.
We
even
had
though
our tea and coffee session.
We had our tea and
so
coffee set up. That's one of the things we do on workshops. Is
seemed to be very popular.
It was. It got to become a regular sunrise, sunset thing. After sunrise, hey, Jeffrey, you going to fire up the coffee and tea station? And then at night, while we waited for a sunset, it also became the, hey, can we get a little coffee and tea going? And it works really well because it helps to be, you want to get there early so people aren't rushing. And I think it helps to have that little something to do while you're waiting. You can talk photography, you can talk about the scene. You can
It
get
lets
a little
people
coffee and tea.
socialize, and everybody can kind of come to get to know each other over tea and coffee. That sounds very British.
It does, but
I have
it
my
worked.
British tea,
It was
but,
popular. It was popular.
And
it was about a 50-50 split on the coffee and tea,
You
too.
need to get some biscuits for the tea.
That's what.
And sugar.
And sugar,
as you learned.
yes. I didn't have sugar.
And maybe some decaf options, but
I meant to swipe sugar at one of my gas stops on the way here, but I forgot.
I couldn't believe everybody drinking caffeinated coffee at like 8
And
p.m.
that was surprising because you're right. It'd be like 7:30 at night, 8 at night, and all we have is caffeinated drinks, and people were signing up. So.
I guess everybody was a little worn out, which is definitely, so again, wonderful segue, Mike.
Yes, I agree.
I would say one of my biggest takeaways just as an instructor is that I need to do a better job of managing my sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Because the last day especially, I was really running ragged. I'm still feeling it. You can hear my voice is a little scratchy from yelling over cascading water.
Yeah.
But, getting back, we had a great Airbnb, but getting back there, and by the time you kind of get yourself situated and then you want to sit and relax a little bit and just decompress, I was probably decompressing for too long instead of just going back to the bedroom and crashing out.
Yeah.
So I think I averaged about 5 hours of sleep each night of the
That was my
workshop,
average
so-
too. I was 5.5 hours of sleep. And from the instructor perspective, it is tough to balance because you're trying, I think from an instructor perspective, you've got to go into everything with energy.
Right.
And Michael, despite being tired, he completely,
Can't show
no
up.
one would have known that it was.
I don't
now
wanna
I
be
knew
here.
because I was getting the, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I need caffeine. Hey, can you fire up the coffee? But, from the actual interaction with our clients and stuff, I think both of us came in with high energy. But that is a very difficult thing to balance because it's hard to show up. You got to be there ready to help them with the questions they have, help get them the locations, and it is difficult to balance. And I know, and it wasn't just this workshop. I know previous ones where I've done them. The multi-day ones, it's like you're out there at sunrise, so you're getting up early. Sometimes you got drives here in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The drives to some of those spots, you're in for an hour to get to a spot. from where we were based out of, and that means you got to get up super early. You want to get there so they're not rushing. And same, you're out at sunset,
Right.
and you're there till 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock, and then you drive home another hour and a half from there. So you're burning it at both ends for sure.
Yeah, long days, and we had midday breaks. But
We did.
Even there, you and I would spend half of it offloading photos
Yeah.
or talking about what we were going to do for the evening,
Yep.
afternoon and evening shoot. So I think I only took an afternoon nap twice.
Yeah.
And yesterday I took that one and it did the opposite. It just
Yes,
made me more
yes.
tired.
He slept a
so-
little too long.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I've got a corporate training background, and you still have to show up no matter how you're feeling. You got to show up interested and with energy. Otherwise, nobody else is going to be interested,
Yeah.
and they're going to just be
Yep.
dragging
Yeah, if
even
you
more
don't-
than what they really are.
Exactly. If you don't come in with that energy, they get even if they see you looking tired or acting tired,
Right. Or disinterested,
right?
or-
It
yeah.
fades into them. But if you
Right.
keep that energy up, because I know our clients were getting fatigued. They
Right,
appreciated those midday breaks. Everyone seemed to, yes, I want to go out because they understood this is a limited opportunity. I'm with someone to go places, so they wanted to be there. But I do think us coming in with the energy, no matter how we feel, was important to that,
Right.
because otherwise they would see, hey, we met at 6 a.m.
Right. The
We'd
instructors
look
aren't
ti-
excited. Why should I be
right.
excited about this?
So I think that is an important point
Yeah.
to
On the
do.
flip side, what was great about the workshop is going to some of the lesser known locations that we went to, and I can't remember which overlook it was we pulled up to yesterday, and everybody was kind of like, we're actually going to, it was like, should I get my camera out for this? And I was like, yeah, come on. And,
Yes.
then suddenly you help them see, whether it's with the longer 100, 400,
Yep.
100, 500 lens or whatever, you help them start picking out the little details that when they roll up, they're not necessarily looking at. So it was good teachable moments too, in terms of, that participant viewpoint of why are we here? There's nothing obviously exciting or grand or anything
Right.
like that. And to me, that was one of the biggest pieces that we were able to help the attendees kind of learn throughout the week is it's not just, and I repeated it several times, especially when we're shooting cascades, like, the big obvious thing might be that cascade,
Yep.
but don't forget to look around and look for the other little areas. And I refer to it in past writings and on this workshop is, showing the place as well as showing the place's soul.
Yes.
So the place
Good way
is
to
the
put it.
broader sense of it, maybe the wider view or whatever, but showing its soul is, those little details that you can pick out along the banks or the trees or, dogwoods along the streams or whatever. So yeah, I think that was all really good. So.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the key takeaways from the workshop is, the workshop, we did the normal, we help you with your technical settings. Oh, I want to learn more about focus stacking or how you set up your camera controls or anything like that. And we did all of that normal stuff for the people that needed that and wanted help. Some were, that range of questions, but it's that showing up to a scene. The number of times we would show up somewhere and people would be, what? And you'd tell them, well, we'll be here 15 minutes, and if
Right.
no one finds you, we'll move on to another
Right.
spot. But in almost all of those cases, we ended up hour
Right, I was
and a
gonna
half.
say, yeah, we'd be there an hour. Everybody's kind of
Right.
split off and hunting around and
Yeah.
finding things and getting
Exactly.
excited.
So I think that's key to walk up to scene and really explore it to
Right.
get a chance to see it.
Yeah, and conversely, with the getting so locked in on the view or the the subject, it's also can't find or can't see the forest for the trees mentality too. Sometimes they'd walk up and they just want to know where to even begin, and
Right.
kind of like that overlook. But even at some of the cascades, if it wasn't like a big cascade with a lot of elevation, they may not have been terribly interested. And again, it's like, well, look at this, and you can notice that, and
Right.
starting to help them see how we see. I kept referring it to as my 500 millimeter vision.
Right, right.
And how do you get that? Well, it's just becoming familiar with it over time. The more
Yep.
you do it, the more you practice, just like anything.
Yep.
You're rolling it out. So, any other takeaways from this one? Because this was your first in a national park.
This is
right?
my first national park workshop. I've done a couple years of getting used to the smaller areas, but national parks have a little bit different permitting system to be authorized to run in a national park. So this is my first year really branching into the national parks to get my feel for the permitting process and how that all works. So that was interesting. It wasn't too bad to do that, but yeah, that was a bit of a
Yeah.
little
And
bit
you
of work
said
to
this
it.
one, Smokies, was much more difficult than like Death Valley. that you've
It
got coming
was.
up later.
Of the parks, I'm doing 2 this year, Great Smoky Mountains and Death Valley towards the end of this year. And both systems, they have different people responding to your permit stuff. So in the Smokies, was always very slow to respond to questions or anything like that. Whereas Death Valley, I'd get a response within a business day from that. And even the permit processing was way faster with Death Valley to get approved and signed off on than it was with the Smokies.
Right.
So maybe it's park size, number of people running in here. But yeah, that was an interesting how the two situations are completely different. Death Valley was pretty easy to do. And
I would guess, although Death Valley is certainly, I think, growing in popularity with photographers and photographer workshops, I would guess that Smoky Mountains may get inundated.
Probably, because they're
Being
running
the busiest
permits.
park in this time of year. And I mean, just right now, how many other photographers have we seen?
We've seen so many
There's overlapping workshops and the whole bit. So.
And then the permitting process isn't just for photography workshops.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that there's any activity that
Commercial
happens
use.
exactly any commercial
Right.
activity that happens inside the park needs to have one of the
Right.
permits.
Well,
So-
now we became very quickly aware of the big Bronco meetup.
Yes.
Ford Bronco meetup, which has been overtaking the town of Townsend and parts of the park at times.
Yes.
And us running ahead of it to not get caught in the traffic jam, but I'm
Yes.
sure that sucked up a lot of their time.
Exactly.
That's a huge event, man. They got that whole field.
Oh yeah,
blocked
there
off.
was that one day we saw probably 100+ Broncos
Yeah.
cruising through Cades Cove.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was interesting.
Well, good. So what do we talk about next?
Um,
We're at 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Do we have anything we can bore people with?
So we could talk about
This is the part where the first episode of the podcast stalls out and everybody leaves.
I mean, one of the things on the workshop, I think that you and I both sort of talked people through and seeing those small scenes and narrowing it down was using the phones to set up their compositions. It might be interesting to touch on that just a little bit. 'Cause I think
take your test shot.
Yeah, take your test shot, and then you sort of taught me the focal length trick to get how to get the focal length.
So
off
with the iPhone,
image.
at least, you've got, I've got the iPhone 16 Pro, so you've got the multiple lenses, but even when you're taking the photo, if you hold down on one of the 1X or 3X or 5X, whatever it is, then it brings up a dial so you can go anywhere in between those focal lengths as well. And you can even go beyond the 75 millimeter that I think the 5X is. So I think it goes up another like 10X digital zoom on top of that. And I don't think on the dial it shows the millimeter focal length between, but if you take the photo, then you can just go in and look at the info.
And that's what I found super helpful because I was used to using an iPhone to, I'm a big, both of us obviously are. He just taught me an extra little trick to it was, I think when you're trying to line up those small scenes or line up a scene before you get your gear out of the bag, because I think we both encourage, don't set up your tripod right away.
Don't plant roots.
Right. Approach a scene, wander around and shoot with it. And using the iPhone, I find useful because it gives you that 2D view of the scene, which is, I think, why we both do it. And you can change that composition. Is it interesting or not to sort of get that
Try a
list.
square comp or a 4:3 or whatever to try to get a better idea of what might work.
And so I'd always been doing that, but then I heard Michael say, well, you can get your focal length of what? And I'm always grabbing the wrong lens out of my bag. Like, oh, do I want my 24-120 or my 100-400? And I'm always like, I'm not 100% sure what I've got. But that little trick of take the photo and hit the little I button information, and it'll tell you what focal length. I can't tell you how much time that probably saved me grabbing the right lens because I would line it up. Oh, that's a, 120, 135 shot.
Right.
And so that means, well, I'm grabbing my 100-400 then as opposed to dragging my 24-120 out. So I thought that was super helpful and a little tip I picked up on.
No, and I know several of the participants, or at least a couple of them, started doing it too.
Yeah.
I think for me, where I struggle with what lens to grab is kind of that gray zone between the two. Like, my 24-105 might reach it, but not quite sure. I can just take that quick test shot. But for me, it's also, if I'm not entirely sure if a scene is worth photographing, obviously it's a lot easier to just take that.
Yes, for sure.
These are lousy quality because I'm just taking with the JPEG. It's not like it's a raw file even, so they look awful.
Yep.
But you can at least get that idea of whether it's worth pulling out. Or you can refine the composition before you sit down the tripod.
Exactly.
It saves you that time there.
It's a great way to move and work through the scene. And
Right.
Before, I like how you put it, plant roots to the tripod. And I'm 100% guilty. In my YouTube videos, I talk about don't set up a tripod. All too often, I'm guilty of
all you
walk
do
up,
is set-
boom, set
yeah.
up my tripod. And I don't know what it is, but it's like you're tethered to that silly thing as opposed to, let me go wander a little bit before I set up a tripod. And the phone trick for the compositions, what lens to grab, all of that, I think really helps work a scene to see it, to take it from that grand big scene to the stories and how did you say it, the spirit of the scene?
The place is the broader view, and then the soul is the little snippets you can pick out around.
I got to pick that up because that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. And on the on the flip side too is I use the 100 to 500 pretty, aside from like the stream photography, most of my work is probably in that 100 to 500 range. And was it yesterday morning we went back to Cades Cove?
Yep.
Yeah. So we were standing out in one of the fields, and our participant Steve was standing there and using his 100 to 400 and taking some tight shots of some trees that were kind of nicely lit with some, I think, some orangish seed pods hanging off them or whatever. And he was all excited because he realized that with that 100 to 400, you actually can kind of plant roots because you can just pan around and pick out all these little details that are totally different, even though you're not moving. And I do that a lot too. And I kind of treat it like a challenge or a game of like, how many different compositions can I get without leaving this little spot? Or, you know, maybe I just take a step or two or something. But when you've got that tight focal length zoomed in, there's just almost endless opportunities, especially when the light is good and you're surrounded. And, you know, the nice thing with Cades Cove is it's kind of my sweet spot in terms of like woodland photography because there's so many meadows that you can stand in, and then you're picking out the details on the edges of the woodlands around you.
Yeah, it was great. I know many times in Cades Cove, even while you and I were going through the park before our clients arrived, we would see one interesting scene that caught our attention. And we were thinking, well, we'll stop here for 10, 15 minutes, photograph this scene. I think in most of those cases, we stayed there an hour and a half again, similar to almost our own clients, because you would photograph that and you're like, well, what's over this way?
Right.
And you just spend all that time there.
Yeah. Well, and the more you start seeing, once you find kind of that first little scene with the long lens, then you start noticing, because again, your eye just gets used to it. So you start seeing, oh, there's a little interesting combination of branches swooping over, or the dogwoods interacting with this other tree or whatever. So it's also just training the eye again. So
agreed.
Yeah, I think that all worked out really well. But I do like playing that little challenge with myself, and I'm working alone, even of like, okay, I've got that shot that I first saw, but what else is there? And I think I told you and the participants, like, once you get your shot too, before you even move the tripod or even step back to look, just take your camera and pan while you're looking at it and see what else might there be, even in that, that limited field of view that you've got set up already. So yeah, I think that was a good takeaway for the participants and you.
Yeah, it is. That's one of the things that's been fun hanging out with Michael. We've been online buddies for quite a while now. I feel like
at least a couple of years.
Yeah, at least a couple of years, and then we met and photographed a bit out in Lone Pine, California last year, a little over a year ago, But it's been really great to spend sort of more extended period of time where we're not just, it's been good because, and the reason it's been good because even though we might lead workshops, there's always more to learn. And like I said, Michael has a certain set of strengths, and hopefully I have a certain set of strengths somewhere. But it's been good.
You're doing yourself disservice.
But it's been good to get his take on woodlands, because it's fun to photograph. It's one of those creative areas I struggle. So it's been fun to be able to walk over and look at what he's composing and see, I didn't see that, to help it click.
Well, and I did that plenty with you.
Yeah.
How many times do we joke about comp stomping?
Yeah, we talked a lot. So we're both rushing to post our pictures first so that it looks like the other one comp stomped, regardless of which way it went. But it's been good. It's been great for that, and it's fun to get out with someone else to photograph and see those scenes and learn to see them better. That's certainly an area I continue to work on and try to improve. And I think I'm making progress, but it's part of the fun of photography for me is to keep growing that.
Well, and the beauty of teaching too is you learn by teaching, because it forces you to think through things a little bit more and how to describe it. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me too, is coming into it, and I'm just naturally at the level of knowledge and everything that I'm at this point. And then suddenly talking to somebody that is where I was maybe 5 years ago and realizing, I really got to dumb this down, and starting to get excited about showing them other things they can do. Like, no, I'm going to overwhelm them. So you got to find that balance of teaching versus now I've just done this huge data dump on them and they're completely overwhelmed and they've just tuned me out because they don't, they lost me 5 minutes ago, and I'm excitedly like, you can do this and that and that. So I was trying to build up, through the week, like, okay, I feel like they've got that little piece of knowledge in their head now. So maybe now I could show them, here's how you do focus stacking. We had a split of Nikon and Canon shooters. We did,
which was weird. It was nice because you're a Canon shooter and I'm a Nikon shooter. And so if we got into something overly, for me, which would normally be, I've got to go dig a manual out on my iPad that I've downloaded, I could just go, hey, Michael, can you help with this? And vice versa. Hey, can you help with this? So that was super nice as far as partnering up with somebody to have, essentially we had experts on both camera systems to help through menus.
But yeah, it's kind of like placing gumdrops along the trail and leading them bit by bit, as opposed to just dumping the whole bag out right at the beginning. And they just, you get over-satiated with it. So
establishes fundamentals.
that was one of the things I had to figure out really quickly. Because I think the first couple conversations, I caught myself starting to go down like you're trying to share 5-6 years of additional
and that's a great way to put
it.
It's everyone's at their different place in their photography journey, and if there is someone more advanced and they're trying to dump all the knowledge they've learned in their 5 years, it's completely overwhelming. Versus, okay, I need to simplify down to this element, and like you said, over the course of the workshop, you can build on that. Even over the same workshop, it's not like it takes the whole workshop to build a base, but it's like, okay, let's get this. Cool, you got that. Okay, we're going to take it one more step. Remember how yesterday we talked about this? We're going to add this component to it. So there's certainly a tact and a style and an awareness to do that.
Yeah, I think the other big takeaway for me, not takeaway, just realization is stepping back in time for myself to a ball head instead of a geared head.
Yes,
and a tripod that maybe isn't quite as sturdy or intuitive or just easy to use, and seeing the participants have that frustration that I used to have with my cheap tripod when I first started out, and realizing the value of that. And I even had the conversation with one of them, how much was that, how many thousands of dollars is sitting on top of your tripod right now? Well, the body was this and the lens was that. And how much did you spend on your tripod? Well, it was like 150, maybe 250 bucks.
Let me balance that up here.
And, I'm looking at it, I'm just like, that tripod is giving me anxiety.
Yeah.
And realizing that, of course, everybody's going to, I did the exact same thing, but realizing what a difference. Spending that money, what's the term? The cry once, buy once, cry once.
Yes, 100%.
And I certainly didn't do that. And I don't think most people do, because especially when you're getting into it, if you're not sure you're going to stick with it, well, why would I go out and spend, between my tripod and the geared head I've got and the leveling base I've got $1,000 into my tripod setup.
Just your
and
setup.
for somebody that isn't, full bore into it, or
casual,
I went
figuring out if you're going to stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do you buy a cheap camera when you start? Because you don't know if you're going to stick with it. But man, it is. It's an epiphany of how far my setup has come.
And it's funny, whenever I give tripod talks, either on my videos or if someone asks me, I've done tripod talks for my local camera club where we get them out. And because I've done what I tell people not to do, which is go buy a good one first, but I didn't do that either. And I can literally take to a camera club 5 tripods. And I can say, this is the one I bought first, and then here's why I upgraded here, and here's this head versus that head. And it's not because I collected them all to talk about them, it's because I repeated, I did what people told me not to do. Don't buy a cheap one, get a nice one. It's just, it's the rite of passage, I think, for photography.
And I think we can definitively say, and I don't think we'll offend our participant that had it, because she was fully aware of it by the end of the workshop too. Do not buy the Peak Design travel tripod.
Oh, yes, she was very fed up with that tripod. She was very fed up with that tripod. It is just so cumbersome to use.
It's cumbersome and, to me, totally unstable.
It's got the thin legs. It's like razor thin legs that come out
that
all the way
is
down.
certainly an issue. And my gosh, I'm surprised the thing ever sits still. It's so thin, but the head on that thing is just, it's the first time I've seen one in the wild. And I can see where, she was frustrated, I think, even early on.
I know several times I would help her with compositions, and we would set something up, and all we needed to do was pan a little bit one side or the other. And it was like, you had to just loosen the whole thing, and just, wow, great. Now we're back to getting all 3 axes figured out, up, down, left, to sort it out. So that.
And her frustration was that thing's not cheap either. She spent all this money, and she's frustrated with it. And then, we're working with it and kind of reinforcing, this isn't really stable. You've got a big camera and a big lens on it.
I heard her many times say, I need to get a different tripod. Which is unfortunate, given in that particular scenario, it wasn't cheap.
And it's not like we were scolding her.
No, we totally worked with it. We
beating her down over it. She
right.
was fully aware of it, I think, before she even got to the workshop. And I think this workshop, especially working on uneven terrain and awkward positions, just reinforced that. But
help with all the stream side.
We're on a tangent with poor peak design.
Yeah, sorry.
I like a lot
it
of
had to be said because
I brought it up. I've got some peak design stuff, and it's great, but that tripod is just, woof. Yeah. So if you got questions about tripods, we can help you out a little bit, and heads. So I'd say let's, to use a Matt Payne term, let's shift gears.
Oh my! I think that's a trademarked phrase.
Is it? I don't know.
Phrase. I don't know if we can use that.
Well, anyways, we're going to shift gears. So I'd say we're at the end of the workshop. You're heading home tomorrow. I'm
Yes.
heading home the next day.
Yep.
What do you have coming up next? I know you've got Death Valley in December. I've got a Utah workshop that'll be co-leading with Nathan St. Andre in October. But more immediate, what do you have coming up besides editing your photos?
Yeah, so I got to edit my photos, of course, and then actually this coming up Friday next week. So by the time you listen to this will be past, well past. But I am getting set to head to another one-day workshop that I do regionally, and then looking further out that you'll actually be able to participate in post-podcast release is I've got a West Virginia workshop which I do in Davis Thomas area of West Virginia. That's a multi-day workshop, a lot of waterfalls, overlooks, and the beautiful scenic West Virginia.
When is that?
That is second week of October, I think, is where that
Hopefully this will be out by then.
Yeah, it better be out by
now,
then. We better not put
it's
this off
April
that long.
26th.
Yeah, it is April. Yeah, so we
We've
should
got
be good.
almost 6 months.
Yeah, you will not be making the Hocking Hills workshop, but the West Virginia workshop, I still have a couple spots open on that one. It's a great workshop. It's an area a lot of people don't know, but everyone I've ever taken there has been like, oh, wow. Because you get some very scenic waterfalls, there's some great overlooks. There's a high mountain valley that's fun to photograph. So that one, and then Death Valley in December.
Anything specific planned for your YouTube channel?
I'll continue the same thing. I've found it harder and harder to maintain. I typically do weekly video production, but as I continue to build the workshop side of the world, you know, there was prepping for this and then being at this. So working to make sure I get back to at least every other week release video, but a lot of it will be the same, a general mix of some vlogging, which I do minimal of, but some of that, but some gear stuff. I actually have a couple gear things that I need to get a little more use on and talk about out there. And then just some general camera education, landscape photography education. So probably maintain the same track with the channel and try to hit that every other week release just to sort of back off. Because with spring workshops, fall workshops, it just gets very challenging. As I'm sure you can relate to a regular schedule.
And it's funny, like you're still working full time and building up your business. I went full time with photography back in January of 2022. Yet somehow I feel like I've got less time now than when I was working full time. But I need to get back on the YouTube bandwagon a bit. I've been very sporadic with it. I just released my first infield video since last June as a child screams in the background. I want to do more of that, but even here, I thought I'd be recording some infield sessions between crowds, and even when it was just you and me, like this is the first time I've been here too, so that makes it harder. Yeah. I want to get back to that. I'm hoping to get to Arkansas again in a few weeks, but I'm suspecting that's not going to pan out. But hoping to get back to Colorado this summer. But other than that, I think I want to reflect back on this workshop and try to do some videos, whether it's Lightroom and some of the questions that were coming up. Kind of got me excited to get back into the Lightroom tutorial stuff, which I haven't done.
It's a great source, right? You get to see people where different needs and see, there's a gap here. Because if they'd ask you a question, if you couldn't say, I've got a video on it. Great video topic, right? Now you got a whole list of things. I should do a video on that and it's helpful for workshops because there were questions we would get where it's like, hey, we're going to do a real brief overview of this particular Lightroom thing, but
we can't show it all.
Right, can't show it all. And sometimes it's just chaos around, you're tired.
Right.
But Michael, a lot of times, is able to say, I've got this video here that talks about it, and it digs in a little bit and do that. So, it's a great way to help know what content to create that's helpful. Again, provides that.
Yeah, I'll admit, I've kind of been in this position with Lightroom. Other than a new feature coming out, I've kind of been stuck on where to go next with my Lightroom videos. And whether I try to do an actual true, let's take a few images and provide downloads that viewers can download and charge for it like a course, or I've started recently doing some just off the cuff, like, hey, I'm sitting down and working in Lightroom, I'm just going to start recording my screen and myself and throw those up on Patreon as a new perk for my paid members. But I've been feeling a little, not like I've tapped out on everything there is to show in Lightroom. Like, what do I do next? And I've covered masking, but I think even my masking videos from 2021. So how much can I go back and refresh and update and do it better or in smaller chunks or whatever? Because that was kind of me covering everything when Adobe rolled out the brand new masking. But I think from a Lightroom perspective, definitely got some really good questions that got me excited about doing that kind of content again. then also just in-field questions, or rather it's like even talking about like the value of a better tripod, or, here's again why we love our geared heads versus the ball heads and everything, even though we've got gear reviews, maybe we've covered it on the podcast.
I almost put it in that field craft category of like, we don't have to say get this geared head, get that geared head, or, anything like that. But as much as just, here's a type of equipment that makes my life easier. And that can range anything from how you carry your equipment, store your equipment, to, it doesn't even have to be brand specific, but just things that make your life easier in the field over the course of time. It's that sliver I like to, call fieldcraft to a degree a little bit. A little gear, but.
Yeah. And moving on from there, again, it's like, I'm doing this full time. How do I feel like I'm so behind? But I've got my third limited edition print folio that I need to desperately sit down. I haven't even picked the images I want to do in it, and I've been telling my email subscribers for like 4 months.
Right.
I'll have pre-orders open in the next month, and granted, I've had a lot going on in my personal life. For viewers that don't know, my fiance was diagnosed with breast cancer last fall, and so we've been dealing with a lot there with surgery and stuff. But it's like, I know I need to get home, and I've got like 40 or 50 photos from my archives that I've been working on for months and trying to find a slot of when I'm going to release them. Now I've got, who knows how many new images from this trip.
Exactly.
I've got the print folio. I want to get Lightroom going.
Keep the building.
I've got presentation for Nick Stover coming up in May. You had one already.
I had one, back in mid-April. I did one.
Yeah, so I've got that I've got to prepare for. I've got another presentation that came through Nick Stover, but for a photo club, but that's not till July, so I got a little breathing room there. But it's just, I think that's the biggest thing that with the whole full-time photography is the more you do more to drive your business, which is great because I'm on track to have my best year financially and everything, but that means there's so much more work.
There's
that
a lot
comes
of overhead.
along with
It's not
it,
just good, like this. Take the workshop. It's not just show up and do the workshop. There was a lot of marketing ahead of it, building web pages to support the workshop. Are both of us creating newsletters with content that
writing
point
blogs
into it,
and
running
videos
blogs and logistics and there's a lot of overhead to it. Like even this workshop, I was away. I was sending emails about my Hocking Hills workshop because I had to get questions or I had to get food orders in order to be ready, and that's all happening during this workshop. So whenever we got internet, it's like, I got to make sure this is happening.
Yeah, another reason you don't get much rest during downtime is that's our time, like you said earlier, to get caught up. So it's as much as I want to get back to Arkansas next month, I'm also feeling kind of, what's the word? Relieved, maybe not quite right, but kind of relieved that like if I don't go, that gives me just another week to actually sit and work on admin stuff. And
a lot of it.
And not do photography, but do all the business side of things.
For sure,
So,
it takes a lot of time.
but fortunately, I've got a nice chunk of images that I can trickle out over the next however long. I think we've covered.
Let's say
pretty well here.
one more thing.
Yeah.
A little more about the podcast. For those that have stuck this far, that means they probably like it. So where do we see this podcast going? Obviously, it's bantering, right? We're just
It's
talking.
shutter nonsense.
It's shutter nonsense. We did. It's shutter nonsense, exactly. But we sat down. We obviously had no script. We just talked and went through it. But how do we see this podcast going? What can viewers look forward to if they like what they're hearing so far?
I think at least starting out, we've agreed we're going to do every other week. So
every other week.
As we just finished talking about how much we feel overwhelmed with how much we got to do, let's add a podcast onto it.
That's what we do.
So I think every other week. By the time you watch this, we'll hopefully have the first handful of episodes recorded, so we kind of have some cushion too for the times where we just can't get together.
Because as YouTubers, we've learned if you don't have a cushion, that's why you miss weeks.
Right. I think realistically, we won't be recording in person very often.
Correct.
Although
That's
hopefully we do more
drive.
workshops together.
You drove like 13 hours to see me, right?
And if I was meeting you in Ohio, I think it'd be much further.
Yes, it would be even worse, and there'd be nothing to photograph.
Right. So, I think our goal is to continue to do them with video, so there's that aspect of it, and we can take advantage, frankly, of the YouTube.
Right, and everyone's on YouTube, and while I don't tend to watch podcasts on YouTube, but there's definitely an audience that does, and I think if people do that, then it's probably worth the time for us.
Well, I think I shared with you something like 45% of, what is it, Zillennial? What's the
Z's?
The Z's.
Generation Z.
The youths.
The youths, right?
Watch their podcast.
So we're doing this for you, Generation Z.
It's for the youths, for kids.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
we're not that old that we're gonna just ignore trends. But yeah, so the video, I think
we'll stick
we've
with the
decided
video.
to do that.
Hopefully, the video hits the same day as audio. We'll see how that plays out. Otherwise, every other week, I think, keep the conversation casual and light, kind of updates on what we're working on. Might be things we're seeing in the industry currently that we want to talk about. I was thinking about, there's a podcast I listened to, that Colin and Samir podcast that had the Jack Content
that was a great
from
video.
Patreon on there. And they, on some of their episodes, they have a gripe session at the end where they air a gripe, which I thought was kind of funny, and they keep it lighthearted. I don't want this to be a podcast with two old grumpy men, two old Muppets.
That could be a whole new podcast, the grumpy old landscape photographers.
Well, we got Uncle Grumpy. That might be trademarked, but now I just totally lost my train of thought. But anyway, not just make it gripes, but maybe we throw that in, and then maybe we finish the episode with something that's inspired us recently or whatever. So there's also the positivity to wrap up episodes.
We'll probably have some broad topic, like today we had workshops and talked about that experience and to keep us on something, but it'll be
the next broad topic might be, how in the world are we going to run a podcast?
Exactly, right.
we can talk through it.
How's that going? How'd this first edit go? What did we learn? What did we not like?
And I keep losing my train of thought. We've talked about having some guests on here and there.
We'll do an occasional guest. I don't think we want to be a full guest podcast.
No, I don't want to be an interview podcast, but I think it'd be nice to freshen the pot, so
Agreed.
to speak.
Get a different perspective and get some folks coming through.
Pull in some of the folks we know pretty well and see how those go.
Yeah.
And I think that's really just, obviously if you're still watching by this point, I think you've picked up that this is pretty off the cuff.
Yes, 100%. No script. I almost never do anything unscripted. And this guy here is like, I was like, do you got a script?
Yeah.
Like a bullet point?
Yeah.
He had nothing.
We
just literally sat down and started recording.
It's the old Bill O'Reilly meme. F it, we'll do it live.
Yes. So that's what we did. This is one take. We just sat down and did it.
41 minutes of just...
Which is what we wanted.
Stream of consciousness, right?
Correct, and it's what we wanted because
I feel like it's gone pretty well.
I'm entertained.
We may have one person listening by this point, but I think that'll go pretty well. But I wanted to be lighthearted. That's kind of what I like about Creative Band. We've got Matt Payne with F-Stop Collaborate doing a phenomenal job with interviews. Richard Burnaby does a phenomenal job with interviews. That market's kind of there.
Right.
Like I said, I really did enjoy Cody and Ben on
I did too.
On Creative
Banter.
To
see them sort of to drop back, but
and I think there's Creative Banter, there's podcasts that I've started listening to recently. I probably wanted a little more focused on photography as opposed to Ben in spandex or whatever. No offense, Ben, but
we thought we might have seen Ben out on the foothill parkway that one day.
There was a guy in full
spandex.
I think the colors were a little too bright for Ben. Yes. Definitely had the outfit down. I think that's really the goal here is just keep it lighthearted. And obviously from a viewer or listener standpoint, if there's something you want to talk about or want us to talk about, let us know. Actually, that's something else we talked about. At some point, we don't want to have our first episode and immediately, let's monetize it, ask people for support it and everything. We got to see if it's actually any good first. But if we do a Patreon, I think it's less if, but when we do a Patreon, do a monthly live stream or a monthly Q&A with listeners.
Yes. Yep.
Whether the listener, I don't think we would do listeners on the actual session, but have a list of questions where we can answer listener.
We'd answer
listener and viewer questions and stuff like that. So I'm excited about that too, because I think that's something that I don't feel like I see a whole lot in the photography space, is kind of getting the listeners engaged a little bit and answering questions that way, which some might be difficult to answer in this format, but I certainly from a conceptual standpoint or just picking our brains around our approach
I think it's
or whatever.
Like anything we do, like you and I are both very community focused. I think we like to see it go both directions and not just be us sitting here talking and listening. Like we want, if you like what we say, what we talk about, we want input and try to make it into a two-way. What can we do? Obviously, it's a podcast, so it's predominantly going to be us talking about it. But we'd like,
we are the most interesting people in the world.
Of course. Obviously. That's why we're here and why we're doing this.
And I'd say, too, like, I don't want it to feel like a one-sided relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
I've talked about it. Again, I'm full-time. You're not there, but, especially as a full-time photographer. Hopefully, this is for any type of photographer. Mm-hmm. But as a full-time, it can be a lonely world because I work from home in my home office, and it's not like I can meet coworkers for drinks or anything, especially where I live in Texas. So let's make this a two-way relationship, hopefully, instead of just us talking about whatever the heck we want. And, well, we don't care what you, the viewer, you, the listener, are interested in. And to that end, too, like, give us feedback. If you think we're idiots and we're crazy people, then, well, this may not be for you. I don't think we're going to change the format. So, sorry, you're out of luck. But
feedback is welcomed. If if we dwell too long on something, not to others. But
I've never led a podcast. I've been on podcasts, but I've never driven a podcast. So hopefully we don't drive it off the cliff.
Yes.
So, but definitely open to the feedback and hopefully positive. But we'll take it from there. So I think we're just kind of talking in circles at this point.
I think we're good.
I
think this is our inaugural episode.
Hopefully we'll have, we can say, check back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Subscribe if you like it. Give us a review
please.
if you really loved the first episode. Again, if you got ideas or topics you'd like us to cover, feedback for this first episode, certainly let us know. And with that, I would say I'll give my usual tagline of until next time, take care. What do you think I was going to say?
I don't know if I have a tagline yet.
Oh, well, it's technically my podcast, so we can just use...
But... Okay, we'll use your tagline. We're using his tagline.
All right. Take care.
See ya, everybody.